Given your background, of course, a clear supporter of the original Iran nuclear deal, do you support the recent assassination of General Soleimani and escalations of tensions with Iran?
Well, the JCPOA, when we did it, was a single-purpose deal. Its sole purpose was to prevent Iran from imminently acquiring a nuclear weapon. At the time we did the deal, we were told Iran was just months away from a nuclear weapon, and judged by that criterion, the JCPOA has been successful. It has prevented Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. What it hasn't done, and what it never expected to do, was to stop Iran sponsoring terrorism in the region, to stop Iran destabilizing the neighborhood, to stop Iran being a sponsor of militias in countries around the Middle East. And Soleimani was clearly a key figure in those activities. So these are two completely separate issues: Iran's day-to-day behavior in the region and Iran's nuclear program.
Most of the signatories on the deal outside of the US have been quite clear in their rhetoric in the last couple of days that they want to see de-escalation. If things, though, were to escalate for one reason or another, Mr. Hammond, should the UK back the US almost regardless?
Well, look, the UK and the US are very long-standing partners and strategic allies, and it is the default position in the UK to want to support any US action. But we also like, behind the scenes, to try to persuade the US sometimes to give it one more go, to let's have one more try at avoiding the need for action. And actually what I've seen over the last few days in terms of the rather calibrated Iranian response, and then the rather measured, if I may say so, response that President Trump made to that Iranian retaliation, it does feel to me as though we're in a somewhat de-escalatory phase. But of course, the underlying tensions between the US and Iran, between the West and Iran, remain because of Iran's behavior in the region. This is less about Iran's nuclear program than it is about Iran's behavior in the region.
If we may shift focus while we have you, can we talk a bit about Brexit and the progress towards this very historic move? What are the biggest challenges or potential ripple effects that we may still see when it comes to the British economy as a result of following through with this very big action?
Well, it's clear that the government will now complete the process, and we will leave the European Union on January the 31st. But in practice, there will be no immediate effect because the transition agreement that we put in place the year before last means that until the end of 2020, trade will carry on very much as it did, very much as it does today. So the question then becomes, will it be possible in a race against time for the UK and the EU to negotiate any kind of effective trade deal before we reach December 31st, 2020? The Europeans have been very clear that they think the timescale is too tight. The British government has been insistent that it is possible to negotiate a trade deal on that timescale. Obviously, it's very much in everybody's interest that some kind of trade deal is negotiated so that the UK does not leave on WTO-only trade terms on December 31st.
Mr. Hammond, outgoing Bank of England Governor Mark Carney has given a couple of speeches and interviews in the last couple of days before he steps down. Fairly downbeat, most people would say, about the UK economy. But also this stood out for me, that he said it could be tricky for the bank to ever return to QE in the future because of the perception that it has increased inequality. Do you agree with that? Would it be hard, A, to return to QE, and B, do you accept that QE did increase inequality?
So because by its very nature, QE has increased the value of assets, and assets in this country, as in many other countries, are held very unequally. And there is no doubt that QE has been a contributing factor to a widening in the wealth gap, and that is undoubtedly one of the factors that is driving some of the political currents in this country at the moment. And I think Mark Carney is absolutely right that a government, a central bank in the future, thinking about using QE as a response to an economic situation, will want to think very carefully about the longer-term impacts on distribution of wealth within the UK economy.
Mr. Hammond, I wanted to finish, if I may, by asking about their Royal Highnesses, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, more affectionately known, of course, as Harry and Meghan. I'm sure you've been following the latest news over the last 24 hours. And I wondered, from your position, of course, of having been a significant member of the UK government, if their intention is to significantly monetize who they are, whether they give up their share of the sovereign grant and of taxpayer money or not, would that do serious damage to the future of the royal family in the United Kingdom, do you think?
Well, let me first of all say that I think there is quite a current of opinion, not only in the country but also within the wider royal family itself, that over time the focus needs to be narrowed down so that it is the immediate line of descent that is the focus of the royal family, and the more distant members of the family perhaps take a lower profile role over time. So I think what the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are proposing actually fits rather well with what is probably the prevailing current anyway. What's ruffled a few feathers here has been the manner of this announcement being made, rather than, I think, so much the substance of it. On the second part of the question, it's very commendable for somebody in their position to say, look, we want to make our own living, we want to make our own way in the world. But it is extremely difficult to do that without provoking exactly the kind of reaction that you've just set out there, that this is somebody seeking to capitalise, to monetise on their position. And I think that's a very, very fine line to tread. And while I wish them well, I think they are going to find it very, very difficult to go out into the world and earn their living without provoking exactly those kind of accusations from the media and public opinion here in the UK.